Today, I'm signing an executive order encouraging police departments nationwide to adopt the highest professional standards to serve their communities.
Tonight on Currents News, President Trump overhauling police practices for cops around the country. Team coverage on our kids and how they're coping with the coronavirus pandemic. We have advice you need to know.
Being trapped inside for months with a lack of stimulation and stressed out parents. We'll hear from a doctor on how the pandemic is affecting babies and their development. I'm Jessica Easthope, and that's ahead.
The pandemic has changed the way we live, and that can be really confusing and hard to explain to kids. I'm Emily Drooby, and I'll introduce you to a Catholic mother and teacher who's helping to fix that.
Plus, a police chaplain is here to tell us what he's telling the cops he serves. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. President Trump is encouraging new practices for police in the United States, including limits on chokeholds. Flanked by several uniformed cops in the Rose Garden, he signed an executive order this afternoon. Nadia Romero has the story from the White House.
After meeting with families whose loved ones were victims of police violence and racial profiling,
all Americans mourn by your side. Your loved ones will not have died in vain.
President Trump signing an executive order to change some police practices.
To deliver a future of safety and security for Americans of every race, religion, color, and creed.
Among the reforms, the order establishes a national database to track the excessive use of force by officers and any convictions or judgments against officers for improper use of force. It provides more funding to departments for training officers in use of force and de-escalation techniques, and bans chokeholds, except in instances when an officer's life is in danger and the use of deadly force is allowed by law. And it encourages police departments to add social workers or mental health professionals to respond to calls related to mental health, including drug addiction and homelessness. The president, who prides himself on promoting law and order, also strongly defending police.
Americans know the truth. Without police, there is chaos. Without law, there is anarchy. And without safety, there is catastrophe.
But some say this action isn't enough.
It will not do anything to correct police brutality, which is the real issue.
President Trump now punting to Congress to put more police reforms into law.
And hopefully they'll all get together and they'll come up with a solution that goes even beyond what we're signing today, but this is a big, big step.
At the White House, I'm Nadia Romero.
The former Atlanta cop who shot Rayshard Brooks to death was disciplined in another case that involved a gun. Garrett Rolfe was fired this weekend after the Brooks shooting. He and another officer got into a struggle with the man who blocked the drive-through lane at a Wendy's restaurant Friday night. In 2016, Rolfe was written up for an incident involving the use of a firearm, but the record doesn't provide details. The file on the other cop, Devin Brosnan, shows no disciplinary action against him. Hundreds of Catholics of all ages and races have marched in Atlanta against the sin of racism. More than 400 filled the street in front of the city's Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. The pastor of nearby St. Anthony of Padua Church, Father Victor Gallier, called it a peaceful and prayerful march for justice. Atlanta Archbishop Gregory Hartmeyer participated in the march and led the prayers. Stay with us. Father JAYSON LANDEZAC will be here. He's a police chaplain who's ready to tell us about the big challenges the men and women in blue are facing these days. That's still ahead in this newscast. And please join us for a Currents News special program, Faith and America's Original Sin, an encore showing of the half-hour broadcast about racism and why many in the church call it America's Original Sin, will air tomorrow, Wednesday, June 17th on Net TV, right after Currents News. And you can also see it on Tuesday, the 23rd, after Currents News at 7:30 p.m. We have some promising news about a COVID-19 treatment. A cheap and available steroid called dexamethasone is improving patients' chances of survival. That's according to researchers in England who say their study showed the drug reduced deaths by up to 1/3 in severely ill patients in the hospital. The pandemic is a big concern for parents, especially worried about how the outbreak is impacting their kids. Tonight, Currents News has team coverage about children living through these difficult days. We look at the development of infants who've been kept indoors for months and the mom's new book that's taking on many of the questions kids are asking about the disease. We begin with Currents News' Jessica Easthope. She has advice from our own expert, Dr. Robert Tabali, for a mom and dad who want to be sure their baby daughter has enough stimulation in her life.
10-month-old Emma Josephine just started crawling. She's even mastered repeating sounds. Something her mom, CAMILLE SAJECKI, is especially excited about.
She's talking and babbling more than ever every day. And it's just amazing to watch her grow.
Though Emma's home comes complete with her favorite toys and the love of her parents, she hasn't had as much outside stimulation as she would have before the COVID-19 pandemic.
She was seeing family on a regular basis, her cousins every Friday, and now she's seeing those people through a small screen on your phone via FaceTime.
Hi! CAMILLE started to worry it would impact Emma's development.
If this wasn't going on, we would do mommy and me classes, seeing other families who have small babies. Now, with this, it's very difficult to do any of those things because we're scared.
Dr. Robert Tabali, an infectious disease expert with the Catholic Medical Association, says CAMILLE's concerns are valid.
Any delay that they may have in their development, in their psychomotor interactions, in their physical abilities, they will be able to pick up on that later.
There you go.
But it's not physical development Dr. Tabali is worried about. He says babies and children can pick up on the stress and fears of their parents.
Children could be overwhelmed by taking on the anxiety and fear that parents have. They actually take that on as part of an attribute of their personality.
CAMILLE says Emma's becoming more aware by the day. So at home, she and her husband Sean keep it positive, no matter how stressed they might feel.
We definitely try to keep things as positive as they were before this started, because we know that she feeds off us and we know that she feels what we feel. And if we're down and stressed one day, she'll be right with us.
Dr. Tabali says until things are back to normal, his advice to parents is put yourself in the mindset of a baby like Emma just learning to crawl.
There you go.
Be careful, but have no fear. On Staten Island, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
All the changes we're living through because of the pandemic are confusing for kids and hard to explain to them. Currents News' Emily Drooby has the story of a mom who's tackling those problems head on.
The MEEHAN family wears masks as they play outside their Bay Ridge, Brooklyn home. Just one of many obvious effects of the pandemic, changes that can be confusing for kids.
It's more different than the way it was a long time ago.
Sophie MEEHAN really saw a big change on her 5th birthday, trading in a classic party for a car parade. To help kids understand what's going on around them, Sophie's mom, Kristen, wrote a book.
My dad said this is called remote learning.
Explaining the pandemic.
The kids had so many questions about what's going on and why is this all happening.
Tackling questions about the masks, closed schools, and a whole lot more.
That means it passes from one person to another very easily.
Talking to kids about the pandemic has been a tough job for many parents. To make it easier, Kids Health, a nonprofit health system with doctor-reviewed tips, suggest find out what they already know, help them feel in control, continue the conversation, and offer comfort and honesty about everything going on. That's what Kristen is trying to do with this 24-page book called This Is Not Forever, a title that projects hope. The Catholic woman is using her background as a mom and a public school teacher.
There's a very delicate balance between giving them the information and not scaring them. And I feel like this book was a good balance of that, to give a little bit of information, but also to give that comfort.
And it's working for the MEEHAN family.
It's spreading germs all around. Social distancing is still important, even though it's something that we have to do that we don't want to.
Kristen wrote and illustrated the book in just 3 weeks. She sold almost 500 copies and right now is donating the proceeds to the Robin Hood Foundation, supporting vulnerable New Yorkers. In Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, Emily Drooby, Currents News.
The president of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops says he's deeply concerned about the Supreme Court's LGBT ruling. The High Court ruled yesterday 6-3 that LGBT people are protected from job discrimination by Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Archbishop Jose Gomez says he's concerned that this effectively redefines the legal meaning of sex in our nation's civil rights law. He went on to say, by erasing the beautiful differences and complementary relationships between man and woman, we ignore the glory of God's creation and harm the human family, the first building block of society. There's a lot more news headed your way. Cops under fire. An already hard job has gotten harder. A police chaplain joins us to shed some light on how officers are coping during this time of unrest. Plus, a Catholic organization is answering the call for help during this pandemic, and the phone hasn't stopped ringing. We'll have their story. And kids are hitting the books as schools reopen. We'll show you where when we come back.
Now you can help us put your faith in the news. The next time you capture a newsworthy event, send us your pictures or video. It's easy. Go to netny.tv/send us, and you may see your submission on Currents News.
As America comes to grips with the killings of George Floyd and Rayshard Brooks by police, there's unrest across the land. Protesters are demanding racial justice and an end to police wrongdoing. The cops, sworn to serve and protect, are feeling under fire. Joining us now is Father JAYSON LANDEZAC, a chaplain to the Oakland, California Police Department and the pastor of a largely African-American parish. And Father, after George Floyd's death, you said, at this point, at this time, at this juncture, Black Lives Matter. How are you sharing that message with the officers you minister to?
You know, first of all, Christine, thank you for having me here. It's difficult to do that because I think oftentimes folks in law enforcement, particularly these past few days, see and have always heard Black Lives Matter, meaning that their lives don't matter. And I think that there's a different narrative these days a bit, and I think that the officers out there are seeing the kind of reaction that folks from throughout the world are rendering towards law enforcement these days. So it invites them to take another pause and get a sense of reevaluating what is it about their profession that's causing folks to react as they're doing now.
Right, and the cops on the street have a difficult job. They're sometimes faced with making split-second life and death decisions. Is their work even harder now? Could they be reluctant to take action now?
I think so. I think they're now, with the advent of phone video and that type of thing, there's a real second thought about being able to respond in ways that could be seen or viewed as antagonistic.
Right. And many Black people say they don't trust the police. You know, years ago, kids often looked at cops and saw heroes. What are you telling the men and women in blue about rebuilding the relationship between them and civilians? And what's the morale like these days?
Oh, morale's terrible. I think the morale among law enforcement, they're relying really on each other to give the kind of support that they need in this real transitional time.
Right.
A lot of them, I think, are doing a lot of soul searching. Others are trying to look towards others within the law enforcement community for a sense of support during the midst of all of this.
What are they saying to you?
They're trying to find meaning in their work. There's a sense of, at least in Oakland, a lot of our officers have really expressed having dedicated their lives to working within our community, which is largely a minority community, working within some of the toughest neighborhoods, feeling both angry and confused about the lives which they've given and the reaction in large part towards the brutality of some within the law enforcement community. Those who I've spoken with by far have said overwhelmingly that they just are abhorrent of what happened, abhor what happened in Minneapolis. And it's a terrible reflection on law enforcement in general, but understand that there's a deeper need to look and do some soul searching also in the meantime.
Right, and in Minneapolis, a majority of the city council there wants to dismantle the police department. Here in New York, some politicians are calling for a big bite to be taken out of the NYPD's budget. Are these good ideas?
I think being able to have law enforcement respond to things like what we call in California 5150 mental health cases or homelessness, oftentimes that could be better suited to other resources. I think being able to direct some of those resources towards addressing some of those needs. Your officer doesn't need to be both social worker and a street psychologist at the same time. I mean, that could perhaps be redirected elsewhere. So when people talk about defunding police, I'm getting a sense that it means taking those kinds of responsibilities away from sworn officers and have them deal with crimes of that are particular to what they're necessary for.
Right. And how do you counsel an officer who's been involved in a shooting while on duty?
Well, you listen. I mean, you get a sense and be not judgmental. They're listening and be supportive of them as a person. I mean, I think that that's the role I have as a law enforcement chaplain. I mean, my role there is to be supportive of that person in the midst of whatever struggle they're going through, in the midst of the shooting that had taken place.
All right, Father Jason Landeza, chaplain for Oakland, California Police Department. Thanks so much for sharing that information with us.
Christine, thank you very much.
Jails and prisons are once again hotspots for the coronavirus. Cases are on the rise inside correctional facilities. The number of inmates infected has doubled during the past month to more than 68,000. This as protesters have been arrested in recent weeks and often placed in crowded holding cells in local jails. The church has been on the front lines of the pandemic. Organizations like CARITAS have been helping those affected. In Mexico, the charity set up a hotline so it can come to the aid of those in need.
We've received and met around 70,000 requests for aid. We're talking about 70,000 families, which also means 70,000 families who have been shown support from charity to human contact.
They set up 45,000 food pantries and are still in the process of setting up another 15 to 20,000. In Spain, schools are welcoming students back to class in parts of the country where the lockdown restrictions are easing, but the classroom isn't the same way they left it. Atika Schubert has the story from Madrid.
School may be a distant memory for kids in quarantine, but in Madrid, the Colegio Virgen de Europa is welcoming students who want to come back, with coronavirus precautions, temperature checks at all school gates, hand washing before and after each class, and teachers are regularly tested for the virus. It's all about getting used to the new school rules, explains primary coordinator Sarah O'Halloran.
I think children find a sense of security in rules and repetition, so this routine that has quickly become the new norm is something they feel quite comfortable with.
Classes are also smaller. At the moment, half the class is online, the other sits in desks spread far apart. Frequent cleanings to disinfect hallways and other high-traffic areas. Recess and lunchtimes are staggered as teachers corral classes into separate spaces. No football or other ball games allowed.
What's the hardest thing about coming back to school?
That we can't give hugs and we can't play sports, sport that we share our things, like football, basketball.
Yes, the 2 meters from one person to another.
There's only about a week left of classes in the year, but this school is trialing out what could be the new normal in September. That includes mandatory masks in the hallway, but also, as you can see, these lanes that make sure that students and teachers keep a safe distance apart.
So how much of a risk is opening schools? We asked an epidemiologist.
I believe the risk of reopening school is not very high, actually quite the contrary. I think the relevance and the benefit of reopening schools for children and parents of these children is actually very high. Children are at extremely low risk of both catching the disease as well as spreading the disease.
Atika Schubert, Madrid, Spain.
There's a very special section inside the latest edition of the tablet newspaper you'll want to have. A 48-page pullout that pays tribute to priests of the Diocese of Brooklyn who've achieved very important milestones, decades of service to God's people. Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio is one celebrating his 50th year in the priesthood. The pullout is online at thetablet.org. And these special pullouts are best appreciated by having the paper itself. Now more than ever, you need to subscribe to the tablet. You'll save up to 55%, and there's another big benefit to subscribing. The newspaper comes directly to your mailbox. Go to the website, thetablet.org/home55, or call 877-883-8356. Still to come on Currents News, they weren't playing. A group so frustrated that playgrounds are still closed, they took matters into their own hands. Also ahead, a police officer in the right place at the right time, being hailed a hero for saving 2 toddlers. We have the video. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Frustration over closed city parks led protesters in Williamsburg, Brooklyn to cut the locks from a local playground. Before the bolt cutters came out, a rally by members of the Orthodox community was staged at Middleton Playground. They called on the mayor to open the gates and let children play before taking matters into their own hands Monday night. The Parks Department says it's trying to work out a solution with the community. 2 little girls in California will soon be playing again, thanks to a police officer who saved their lives. Their dad apparently drove his pickup off a cliff, and it plunged into the ocean with the toddlers inside. Cassie Carlisle has the story.
Pulling up to Sunset Cliffs, K-9 officer and former Marine Jonathan Weiss saw a crumpled truck against the cliffside.
My goal was get down there, get him out of the water. I could see him, and he had one of the girls in his arms. And I have a 2-year-old daughter at home, and so I imagine, hey, what if that was my wife and kid down there? You're not going to stand here on the cliff and watch it happen.
Pulse thumping as he thought quickly to use his SWAT K-9 leash to rappel down the side of the cliffs to get to the man and his 2-year-old twin daughters.
By then, about 4 or 5 other cops had shown up, so I just pretty much threw the end of the rope, the leash to them, and said, hang on. And then I just jumped off.
Successfully lowering down to the family bobbing in the water, then debating how to rescue them.
I remember, hey, wait a minute, the Marines taught you how to do water safety rescues. So I had a little flashback on how grab him under the armpit and push him. So I just swam, holding him and the girls above water.
Once on shore, the girls were hoisted up in a backpack so they could be taken to the hospital, and their father was lifted by a helicopter.
Would you say that he saved their lives 100%?
I believe he did.
San Diego Police Chief David Nislike.
Probably the most heroic thing I've seen in my 32 years.
Proud of Weiss, who is the Officer of the Year. Honored for a long list of heroic acts, including helping arrest the suspected Chabad of Poway shooter. All of this while police are under the nation's microscope.
I didn't do the job to be liked every day. I didn't do it to become rich. I did it because I want to be out there making a difference and helping people, as cliche as that might sound, but I'm just glad I could be there.
Protecting 2 toddlers when they needed him most.
Do what you gotta do, but then after everyone was safe, it hits you and you want to get home and hug your kids, that's for sure.
Again, that was Cassie Carlisle reporting. The police chief says the girls were taken to the ICU and are expected to recover, thank God. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.